Welcome to Exploring the Paranormal. Hosted by Heather Leigh, PhD, Exploring the Paranormal offers a new, fresh look into paranormal research. Join Heather as she discusses some of the many haunted locations worldwide, discusses why these locations are haunted, hear from paranormal researchers about their personal experiences at these locations. Additionally, Heather takes a journey into the science behind the paranormal, discussing topics such as thermodynamics and the Heisenberg principle and how they both affect paranormal activity. Now, your host of Exploring the Paranormal, Dr. Heather Leigh.
Good morning, everyone, and I am excited to be here on another beautiful Tuesday morning. We were just discussing backstage how cold it has been across the country. So for those of you up north, I hope you guys are staying warm, and especially those of us in Florida here. I know it doesn't sound like much to some other people, but it's been in the 40s at night and early morning. So I hope everybody here in Florida has been bundling up and staying warm as well. I do have an amazing guest backstage. He will be joining us in just a few minutes. I'm going to go through a condensed version of my introduction that I usually do. He came on early, which is perfectly fine. Love having my guests join me right from the start. That gives us plenty of time to talk. And feel free to ask questions throughout the show. We're always here and happy to answer the questions. And you guys know if we don't know the answer, we're going to definitely try to find it for you. Okay, so for those of you who are new to the show, I have more than 30 years experience in the paranormal, everything from researching to investigating, a lot of behind the scenes work, EVP analysis, all of that stuff, which means that this season of the show is going to be absolutely amazing because I have guests that we're going to just chit chat back and forth about all of those topics. Quick recap, you guys can still purchase my book, Haunted Southern Nevada Ghost Towns. It's available on Amazon, or you can reach out to me directly to get an autographed copy. Did get my final confirmation. Ghost and Legends of the Vegas Valley will be available February 13th. I found out in August, they said that they're hoping for the release date for Haunted Florida Lighthouses, and then Haunted Florida Ghost Towns and Haunted Nevada Mines will also be out later this year. So make sure you keep following the show. Also following me on Facebook at Exploring the Paranormal Show to get all the details on everything that's happening. And one thing I do want to say that I'm excited about, something came up on my Amazon Prime the other day when I was flipping through it to see what new releases they are. We talked last week about how we still didn't have an exact release date for Real Haunts 3, but it is officially out. My paranormal team, which you guys know is my family, we are featured in it. We are exploring the haunted city of Goldfield. We talk about the Goldfield Hotel, the Nixon Cook Building, and then an investigation at the cemetery. So make sure you guys check that out. It's on Amazon Prime Video for $4.99. It's not too bad. And I hate watching myself, but it actually turned out really good. And I love working with motion picture video. They did a real good job on Real Haunts Ghost Towns that we were also a part of. And this was just basically unseen footage from our investigations in Goldfield and Gold Point. And then it also includes 3 other paranormal teams across the country. And that is just a really, really neat concept that they did. So real quick, I'm going to try to find the bio that I have here. I am excited to have, I just lost it, from Anubis Paranormal Research Organization, Christopher George joining me. He is their Executive National and International Director. His bio is absolutely amazing. He started having interactions at a young age with the paranormal, and I'm looking forward to bringing him on so he can talk more about what got him interested in the paranormal and talk to you guys about everything that he has. Hey, George, how are you doing? Or Christopher. Oh my God.
Don't worry. If that's the worst that's been called to me, I'm doing good. No.
Well, thank you for joining me. I'm glad to have you on here. I'm bummed that Anson couldn't make it, but we all know family things happen, and
sure,
you just never know what's going to come up and not be able to make it. Hopefully, we can get him on at a later date, or just get you both back on at a later date.
He's a very interesting individual too. He's definitely one of my better directors, and he and I have been working very, very closely on a lot of subjects. And it's good when you find people that you can really rely on. In fact, I'm more than likely going to promote him to the international assistant directorship, because we're getting so many chapters now, both here in the U.S. as well as now starting in Europe, that it's hard for me to keep track of everybody.
Trust me, I know. I used to work with the Warren Foundation, and we were worldwide as well, and keeping up with all the different, districts, chapters.
Right.
It can get challenging.
It does, and you start to forget which one's which and who's doing what, and so on. I'll tell you, thank goodness for computers, because if I didn't get annual reports, I'd be completely lost in not knowing what's happening.
Yeah, I have notebooks everywhere and spreadsheets all over my computer.
I'll tell you.
Like you said, it is hard to find people that, you work with well.
Right, exactly.
And that's why I have my family as my team.
Yeah, really.
Right.
Well, that's, again, you have to fall back. And we love the work so much, but yet, it's a complicated process. And that's what a lot of groups don't realize when they start out, that it's not just going out on an investigation. There's paperwork, and if you're really dedicated to the science of it, you've really got to make sure all of your T's are crossed and all of your I's are dotted.
Yeah. And unfortunately, these new teams, nothing wrong with it, because we all started somewhere.
Sure.
But these new teams, because they're following, I guess you would say, what's on TV, they're not allowing the true scientists in the field to excel.
Exactly. And sometimes it can really make for a very bad look on how the rest of us are presented. And it's a shame. And really, I'm a strong one for para-unity and working with other groups, because we're never going to find the answers if we hoard all of the evidence. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that feel like, if I've got this, I can get my own TV show, or something that will make me famous. And it kind of sours a little bit. Information is good, books are good, research is good, but when you're in it for the glamour of it, it's not so good.
Right. And then you have the ones that follow para-unity saying, well, just because I'm a paranormal investigator, you must support me. And it's like, well, no.
Yeah, exactly.
Prove to me why I need to support you.
Right. Oh my goodness, yes. It's a challenge. I worked for the Park Service for over 45 years, and this has been just as much of a job as that was. But as a park ranger, when they found out I was dealing in the paranormal, they really utilized me in that, because a lot of the parks are haunted, especially some of the historical parks. So I was lovingly nicknamed Ranger Mulder. Well, we got a problem. We're going to call Ranger Mulder in on this one.
At least you got to do something you enjoy while you worked.
Well, that's it, exactly. I was kind of walking the fence, because the first part of me has to look at it as basically a law enforcement officer and a forensic officer. And then you kind of ease yourself over into the paranormal side. So excuse me. But, it really, I wouldn't say paid off, but it helped. And, but the problem is, as I'm sure many of your audience have heard of the missing 411, I've been heavily involved in that. And David Politis, of course, has been the spearhead on that. But at the same time, a lot of the information that he got was from individuals like myself and other rangers. And so we've kind of been in the background primarily due to restrictions that we've had by the Park Service about talking about issues. And unfortunately, there is a lot of spooky things going out there in the parks. But ironically, I've always been involved in the paranormal ever since I was a small child. And so it's kind of walked with me hand in hand.
Yeah, that actually leads me into the one question I wanted to ask you is what sparked your interest in the paranormal? I know we all have that one aha moment that says, oh, this is what I need to be looking into more.
Ironically, that was when I was a very young child, approximately the age of 7 or 8 at the time. And I was living in a little town called Leadville, Colorado. Leadville's pretty famous as one of the big gold mine booms of the 1800s. And so there was a lot of miners, there was a lot of mines in general. And, you just look in your backyard and you see the remnants of these old mines. So one morning early, probably about 2 or 3, I was awake for some reason in my bedroom, and I saw whom I thought was my father standing at the door. But it was just a black silhouette. And I was going, Daddy, what are you doing standing in my door? And there was no answer. And I said, Daddy, what are you doing? Still no answer. And I went, boo, Daddy, ironically. And the figure kind of cocked its head, looked at me a little bit more, and then walked off to the direction of my parents' bedroom. Well, the next morning I woke up and I went out to the breakfast table and I asked my father, I said, Daddy, why were you standing at my door last night? He says, what are you talking about? I wasn't at your door last night. I said, yeah, you were. You were standing in my door and you wouldn't talk to me. He says, kid, you were dreaming. I wasn't at your door. So I went, okay, well, whatever. So the next night, not only did the figure reappear, but he had a friend with him. And they both stood there and looked at me, and I started talking to them. Now, they didn't respond back, but they just kept, kind of motioning with their heads. Now, at this time, I couldn't see any features. I couldn't really tell anything except they were 2 men. And then finally, they walked off again. Well, the next morning, I didn't say anything to my parents, but I found it very curious. And then I started noticing others around. And eventually, as I became older, I started to realize, wait a minute, we live up behind an old mine, and what if those were miners, dead miners, just taking a leisurely stroll around the area? And to this day, that's what I think it was. But I even had what I believe a extraterrestrial contact. There's a lot of UFO sightings up there as well. Early in the morning again, about 9 or 10 years old at this time, I saw a huge blue light out in the living room area. And so I got up and I started walking out. Well, at the front of the house, there was a bunch of panes, glass panes, right in the kitchen. And we lived up on kind of a hill. And so when you looked out the window, you were actually looking down at the street. And so I walked up, and of course, everything was flooded in this blue light. I didn't know what was going on. And as I looked down, I saw what I thought was this huge owl looking up at me. And all I really focused on were the eyes, these big black eyes. And I remember distinctly putting my head up against the glass pane. And when you live in the cold country, one thing you notice is when you put your head up against a glass pane, it is cold and it hurts. And that rush came through me when I was looking down at this, whatever it was. And as I looked at it, I kept getting this weird humming sound in my head. And then that was it. I was back in my bed the next morning, didn't know what happened, but I never had another encounter that I'm aware of along those lines. So those are the things that really got me started and got me excited about the paranormal. I started researching UFOs, investigating ghosts when I was able to understand that what I was seeing wasn't really human, it was something else. And so that led me down the career, and I'd always been interested. And finally, when I was in college, actually we'd moved out to California, Southern California, so I went to UCLA. And at that time, in the early 80s, they had a paranormal division. And I was able to attend that. And it was the hardest course I had ever taken in all my life. Because when we started, we studied everything from architecture to thermographics, to geology, to history, to everything that would be of importance to us, so that we could rule out the big percentage of paranormal activity.
Yep.
And so I did graduate. I did get a bachelor's degree in paranormal studies. And it's very rare to get those from anywhere these days. But at that time, it was kind of looked upon as, well, we were called the spooky kids or the para-nerds, things like that. It was not what it was like today. I think there was only a couple shows, Unsolved Mysteries and maybe In Search Of, that was on television at that time. Now you turn on the TV and every channel is filled with paranormal TV shows. So that I started getting involved in with other paranormal groups while I was taking classes, still taking courses in natural science and law enforcement for my park ranger aspect. And finally graduated from that, got into the Park Service, started being transferred, and I was stationed back here in Colorado. My folks lived here, so I was able to be right in their backyard. And I and another individual by the name of Jared, he and I created Anubis Paranormal Research organization, just starting with the two of us. We never imagined that we are where we are today. But the reason for that was every time I was transferred to a new location, I'd start a new chapter. So I went from California to Colorado to Florida to Nebraska, Texas, and then back to Colorado again. And so we've really developed 7 working chapters through the United States. We all follow the same philosophy that I established. I've got a manual that, I kid you not, is probably the size of an old phone book. And it's because everything I learned, everything I experienced and also communicated with other individuals was put in that. So it's kind of our living Bible, so to speak. But now this year, just starting here in January 2023, hard to believe, we've starting a chapter in New York and now internationally in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, with hopes of starting one in England, Italy, France, Germany, and Japan.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they'll also, being international, it'll offer you insight into how different cultures.
Exactly.
Because that's the one thing I've learned is different cultures view the paranormal differently as well.
Yes. Well, and it's even like our existing chapters, the regions are completely different from one another. So the experiences and the encounters are going to be that same way. And so one group, even though they follow the same philosophy, may get a different result just based on their locale and the history of the area.
Yep. Yeah. And for you guys, do you do just help clients, or do you conduct different experiments?
No, we do both. We primarily, our goal is to help as many people as possible. Our motto is not only helping the living, but helping the dead as well, even though we also study UFO cases, abductions, extraterrestrials, and cryptids. Most of what we are centered on is basic hauntings and the evidence of hauntings. And so we go through a very rigorous scientific process with evidence. You know, we'll take each photograph or video and literally tear it down to its basic components to make sure that it's not faked or it's not, basically something that we're seeing that's not there. And gosh, I can't remember the word off. It's really in the morning here. But when you see something that
Pareidolia?
Yes, thank you. I need some coffee. It's ironic. Sometimes it'll come right off your tongue, but then when you think about it, it just shuts down.
I do it all the time.
But we really want to come home with actual hardcore evidence, and we have a very extensive database which we can refer to, which holds all the records, all of these statements, all of the videos, photographs, audio, and so on. So it's in one particular form. And then we can just pull it up by file if we have further investigation areas that we need to research on it.
That's pretty cool. And that's what you need, because I mean, it's so hard, especially being a new paranormal investigator, not to have access to all that.
Right.
Because you don't have anything to compare it to.
Exactly. And, we may have a case that's very similar to another case. And by having that accessibility, you're able to compare those and say, well, there seems to be a pattern here. Mm-hmm. What is it? And you can research it. But with any paranormal investigator, there's always more questions than there are answers. So every door you open, there's 6 more beyond that. And you got to choose wisely which ones you go through.
It's kind of like my to-do list. Every time I work on one thing, I have to add 6 more things to my to-do list because I think of, or I discover more things I need to research.
Yes, exactly. And, we've had issues where it's been extremely funny cases that we've dealt with that we were able to rule out. And then we've had some horrific ones. And in fact, speaking personally, here in Grand Junction, we had a situation where we had a hotel called the Melrose Hotel in downtown. And it was an old hotel built in 1904. And so we went in to investigate. We had the idea of making it our West Region headquarters. And it had a lot of history. The owners were a couple that the husband was from England and the wife was from the Philippines. And so they ran it, and this was back late 90s. And all of a sudden they disappeared. Well, the husband came back and said that his wife had taken off. Well, he decided to go ahead and sell the hotel, and he went back to England. And a couple years later, they found Sabrina's head, her skull, in a field about 30 miles away from Grand Junction. So she had been murdered by him. Mm-hmm. And so they finally extradited him back, and he had admitted that he had killed her. But she was alleged to be haunting the location along with other suicide victims as well as murder victims. But the one thing that was of interest was Ghost Adventures did a show there, and they had talked about a demon. Well, we don't really like to use the D word a lot, but in this case, there definitely appeared to be something diabolical. Mm-hmm. So much so that it went after every one of our team, because we were in the hopes of moving Sabrina and the other spirits on into the light. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, we started having a lot of problems amongst ourselves. I started getting sick, and it particularly came after me because apparently it knew I was the leader. Mm-hmm. And I literally ended up in the hospital for 1.5 years. And I'm still recovering from the injuries that I sustained. I had to have 2 toes amputated due to infection. Nearly died, extremely close to death 4 times. In fact, the doctors had written me off, and had sepsis twice, and had a wound or a flesh-eating wound on my leg. Have just recently had a colostomy, fell and cracked my skull. All of this in the scope of a year and a half, one right after the other. During this time as well, Anson and his family had a carbon monoxide scare in their apartment. And it was in the middle of the night, and had he not gotten up and realized what was happening, they would have passed away. Mm-hmm. But all the other team members had some form of sickness or injury, but not to the extent that he and I did. So it can be a very dangerous job.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I mean, people don't understand that. We get scared too. We just do our best to hide it.
Right. And that's, you've got to go in with an open mind. You can't make any conclusions off the bat, but you've also got to go in prepared, as my dad used to say, you know, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Mm-hmm. And it's true. And it's a rarity when that happens. But when it does, and it really is a diabolical, it can screw up your life really bad. And I'm just fortunate to be here, literally. And, you know, it's kind of limited me on a lot of what I can do. And, you know, I'm not able to go out and run after the ghosts like I used to. But I can do all of the behind the scenes things and do the, you know, monitor from Command Central and so forth when we do have things. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't give it up.
You'll be the organizer.
Exactly. And that's the sometimes the best way when you get to be my age at 61. You kind of have to slow down a little bit, even though you don't want to admit to it.
Right. So. Exactly. Well, I still have plenty of more questions for you, but we do need to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
If you have a set of dowsing rods or a pendulum lying around, then learn how to use them. WLTK DB Talk Radio is hosting a divination and clearing class Saturday, February 11th, 2023. This is an online event and seats are limited. Registration deadline is February 5th. In divination and clearing, you will work with certified psychic mediums Ellie Weisensell and Stephanie Lynn to learn and deepen divination techniques using dowsing rods and pendulums. They will also work to help teach you to use divination practices to clear and release negative energies. To register, contact the station or register online on Eventbrite. Tickets are a staggering value at only $125 each. Register now and join the class online Saturday, February 11th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. The Divination and Clearing class. Tickets on sale now.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I am here with Christopher George from Anubis Paranormal Research Organization, and we've been having a great topic of conversation. And the one question I've been wanting to ask you, and I've had this on my list ever since I booked you for the show, is one of my goals in the paranormal field is to create a standardized research methodology using the scientific method. But I keep getting a lot of blowback saying, well, ghosts don't perform on command. You can't use the scientific method, you know, blah, 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 the whole. What are your thoughts on that? And how can people use the scientific method for their research?
If you do, you know, we get that as well. To me, it's just a natural to go the scientific method, because how else are you going to prove something that 90% of the time is unprovable? Right. You know, we've got evidence of it, but it wouldn't stand up in a court of law. But if you have something that shows the basic components, the scientific chemistry, the aspect of what's going on. Now, it's like what I've been dealing with a lot is, in fact, we're going to be interviewing ourselves on our podcast, an individual that deals with Bigfoot sightings. And as a ranger, I had a couple encounters with Bigfeets. And it's known to be there. There's photographic proof, video proof. A lot of it is faked. But what exactly is it? Why do we never encounter one? Why is there ever no body? And those are the things that you start to look at. And even with ghosts, extraterrestrials, there has to be a scientific component to it. And it deals, I think, with basically dimensional interactions. I think that, science has already proved through quantum physics that the possibility of parallel Earths, parallel dimensions exist. So if that's the case, that's science in itself saying, yes, these things could be real. They just may not be from our dimension, but periodically phase into our dimension. And, you look at the saying, science always says, well, how can extraterrestrials travel such vast distances? And it's to say, well, now you're looking at a society, civilization, that probably is thousands of years advanced than us, that they wouldn't have figured out wormhole technology or interdimensional doorways in order to go from point A to point B. Even Einstein proved that it was feasible to go through that process. So if you don't have the science, then it's like not putting TV shows to bad light, like a TV show. Where's the proof? Where's the proof of the pudding? It's great that you saw all these things, but can you prove you saw these things? Can you prove in your evidence that you actually encountered this? And it's not faked, it's not alleged, it's hard data. And I am a very strong component of that.
Yeah. And that's what these shows need to do, is they're the ones going to all these locations. They should be putting on their websites the hard data that they're collecting.
Yes. Exactly.
Going back to Paraunity, they need to be sharing what
yes.
they find.
Well, nothing drives me more crazy than when they go into these sites. And of course, all this stuff happens overnight. Like, yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I wish that were the case, but it's not. 95.7% of the time, that's not going to happen. But the thing is, too, they leave the client just kind of standing there. They came to no resolve. They just say, oh, yeah, we saw this. Yeah, your house is haunted. Nice. Thank you for having us on your property while we do our show. Next. And they just kind of go, okay. And I always like, well, what can we do for you? Well, get rid of the thing or make it understand not to scare us and work with us.
Right.
Never
yeah.
happened.
I know when we lived in Vegas, we got several calls from a TV show, from people who were on the TV show saying that they needed help because activity got worse.
Yes, you can stir it up if you're not careful.
Right.
It is so true.
Yep.
And then I hate to say it, then it leaves us to come in and clean up their work.
Yeah. I think that's 95% of our job anyway, is to clean up when other people have messed up.
Well, and again, this sparks these new groups out there. YouTube has got more channels than I care to even think of these mostly kids. I mean, one of the, not knocking them, I like watching them, but there's two young men there. I'll not say their names, but they have a pretty good show and they go all over the place, but they're still novices in so many areas. And it shows to the trained eye that it's like, oh, no. you shouldn't have done that. Nope, nope, nope. And you just shake your head. And, but, you know, you see that in a lot of these individuals. And if a lot of their encounters were as severe as they make them out to be, then they need to really learn how to face that and back off when it's out of their pay grade.
Yep.
I mean, we do it. We'll call in other religious factors or other individuals that we know very well that can look at it from a different point of view and so on. But we just don't immerse ourselves in areas that we don't understand.
Yeah, and that's what the newer people they see. You know, they see what they see on TV, and they're like, "Oh, that's real easy." They order all this equipment offline, and then they're like, "Okay," and then they're yelling, "Come at me, bro!" Or
right. Oh, I love the challengers. Oh my goodness, it's like, do you really think that these entities that you're trying to communicate with are going to be friendly after you just challenged them to come and hit you and beat you? They will.
They do. I've seen it happen because I had an investigation. He didn't intentionally mean to say, come at me, but he's like, if you're going to pick on someone, pick on me, because he was this big guy. He's like, stop picking on these poor women who live here. And he got attacked, right? I mean, instantly.
Yeah. They don't think spirits can hurt you. Oh, they can. They can most definitely. And it can be dangerous. And again, those are kind of things they don't really go into on these shows. But, I was watching one last night where they did go into a haunted museum, and they encountered something very diabolical. Their instruments were all negative comments or sayings on the instruments. And one of them got scratched pretty good, and it affected him. But like in my case, I really had something go after me. But ironically, I had something good also protecting me. So it was kind of the yin and yang effect. But it can be severe. It can kill you. And it may not even be paranormal. People go out, what was it, a couple of years back, where two investigators were on a train trestle over this canyon. A train came. They didn't hear it because they had one of those sonic devices that they were listening to, and it had earplugs monitoring the frequencies, and they got hit by the train and killed them. Physical hazards, go into a graveyard, you might fall into an open grave, and that's not a fun experience.
No.
Legalities. I don't know how many of these people go into sites that are basically no trespassing. They're dangerous, but they do it anyway. We always get the owner's permission to go anywhere. If we go into a graveyard, we get the city's permission. We get a copy of it, so if the police do show up, we can show proof that we're permitted in there. So we always go by the legalities of it.
Oh, I think you froze. But going off of what he was saying until he unfreezes is that, one of the topics that I did want to talk about later today, I can do that if there's still time, is urban exploration, which is kind of what he was talking about. When you go into abandoned locations, you want to make sure you get the owner's permission before going anywhere, and also follow safety precautions. Don't go alone. Try to walk through the place during the daytime so you can make a mental note or even make a map. Oh, there he is.
This never fails to happen to me. Every time I interviewed, it's like Big Brother is watching and they're afraid of what I might say about the Park Service. Because every time I do or start going down that street, there's audio problems. They get the calls dropped. Or
the ghosts are watching and no, don't share our secrets.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
But real quick, getting back to Bigfoot before we get too far off of that, I wanted to share with you my son's theory on that is,
sure.
that they're the ghost of cavemen. Is one of his theories.
That is a very interesting thought.
Yeah.
That really does. That kind of plays into it. That is a good thought.
So something to think about and research.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
But yeah, he just brought it up one day when we were talking. I was like, oh.
Yeah. A future investigator there.
Oh, he's been investigating side by side with me since he was 16.
Oh, goodness.
So and he's had some interesting experiences.
I bet. Well, we all have our stories, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And we're special type of people because not everybody could do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like the old saying, when you look into the abyss is going to be looking back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very true.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what's down in that abyss, but it knows about us.
Yeah.
And it does interact.
It surely does.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk also about equipment because I had an interesting experience with an Ovilus. And when that first came out and was getting popular, I was like, no, it's programmed. You can't really use it for paranormal investigations. But I had it, and I was just playing around with one of our other investigators' device, and I didn't realize I had walked around a corner. And so I was kind of I was still within earshot of the rest of the team, but I was like out of sight. And all of a sudden it was like silent until I got out of sight. And then it was death, demon, devil, sacrifice. And I was like, well, who are you going to sacrifice? And then it said you. And I felt a finger run down my back. And I turned around to see who it was, and I realized I was alone.
Okay.
And that kind of changed my mind about the device.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Ovilus?
I think it's a good piece of equipment, but with everything, there's a little bit of not so much. Well, all equipment can be off a little bit. It has to be fine tuned, and we're just starting to step into technology. We still use some of the old school types, compasses. For magnetic anomalies, even go as far as using baby powder. But the equipment has got a lot of credence to it if it's used properly. And you got to know exactly how it's used. You just can't buy it and go, okay, I'm ready to go out and find something. And but the Ovilus does seem to be very responsive. And I look at it like a Ouija board. You're just using a different type of Ouija board.
Right.
And I'm very leery of Ouija boards because it can open up issues and problems if not used properly. And there's so many people that just leave it open. They don't close it down, and they don't realize that if you leave that open, there's still things that can come through. And Uncle Harry may not be Uncle Harry. And we've had to deal with clients that have done just that, thinking it's a relative or a loved one or something, and they welcome it in, and then all of a sudden, all Hades breaks loose.
Yeah, and the same thing can be said with digital voice recorders and EVP sessions. Because I had Mike Cardenas on last week, and he has a client that he was talking about, and he's actually letting her go because she lost her husband a couple months ago. And she's constantly doing EVP sessions. She has cameras set up all through the house, and she sets a plate for dinner with him every night and just talks to him. And she's been getting responses. And Mike's like, that might not be him who's communicating with you, but she won't give it up.
We had a situation, or I personally had a situation, I should say. This was before I really got into organized paranormal research. I went to a Catholic boys' school, high school. And one day, one of the priests came up to me and asked me, since he knew I was interested in the paranormal, he said, would you do me a favor? I've got to go to this home, and I need an impartial witness to go along just to monitor what's happening in case anything happens, that there's two individuals. And it's been cleared by the school if you want to go. And of course, I jumped at the chance. The house was in Downey. And so we went, and it was a bright, sunny day. And we went up to the door, knocked on the door, and this gentleman answered. And he looked disheveled, just looked like he hadn't slept in a month. And he welcomed us in. But when we came in, even though all of the curtains were drawn open, the house just seemed dark. And there was this oppressive feeling to it. And so we went into the kitchen, and Father Jim started asking questions amongst the family members, and he took them each individually. And apparently all sorts of activity had started up, knockings, things being misplaced, religious items being destroyed, and so forth. So they were very, very concerned about this. And it's kind of like when you're standing somewhere and you have the feeling that you're being watched. It felt that way. Mm-hmm. And so Father was sitting, I was standing, and we went round and round with each of the family members. And there was the husband, the wife, the son, who was about, I'd say 13 or 14. And then the daughter was probably about 15 or 16. Mm-hmm. And she was kind of homely, I hate to say, but we didn't think much about it. And he started to talk with her again. And he says, well, when did you start to realize these things? And she started getting very fidgety. She started, kind of like this, and she was kind of bobbing back and forth, like obviously she knew something. Mm-hmm. And so Father said, well, have you done anything? Have you played any games, or have you played with a Ouija board? And she kind of put her head down. She says, well, I've got a Ouija board. And he says, well, tell me what you did, or how did you use it? And she says, well, the kids tease me because I don't have a boyfriend. And I decided to use the Ouija board to see if I'd ever have a boyfriend. And the Ouija board said, yes, I would. And it turned out that the spirit that was talking to me was a young boy my age who had died and thought that I was really cute and said he would be my boyfriend if I wanted him to. And of course, I said yes. So she opened the door. Mm-hmm. And she opened the door to something that was not what it claimed to be. And so Father went, okay, so now we know what the root is, where this is all stemming from. And so he told the parents, he says, we've got to get rid of the Ouija board, and she's got to stop communicating on it with whatever this is. She would not do it. She refused, because that was her boyfriend, and nobody was going to separate them. So it had progressed to wanting a boyfriend to being obsessed by a boyfriend. So the obsession started. So then the possession aspect would start. So it turned out that the priest, he finally released me. He says, okay, this is getting into territory that you're not ready for. So I went back, but I later did find out that they did finally decide to do the blessing of the house, but they did perform an exorcism on the girl. Mm-hmm. And in order to get rid of this diabolical. But the thing is, even with exorcism, it doesn't mean you send them back to where they came from. It usually means they move on to somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And that's the worst part about it.
Yeah. That goes back to the thermodynamics, where energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
Exactly.
Yeah, they just move on.
Right. You go,
and that's the sad part.
Yes, it is. It really, truly is. And we feel so limited on what we can do when we're dealing with entities such as that.
Yeah.
So
it's and I know exorcisms are rare, even though everybody thinks every haunting is a demonic haunting, and thanks to our television comrades that we have. And that's why I was hoping Anson would be on, but he's an exorcist for your team, correct? Did I read that correctly?
Right.
Go ahead. I was going to say, how many cases have you done? And
oh, good Lord. Oh, my goodness. Well, we started, well, me personally, I mean, this goes back way into my high school days. But we started APRO in 1996. So we've been around 26, 27 years now. And, but I've always tried to put together a good team, one that would consist of a demonologist, tech people, investigators, historians, researchers, case managers, and so forth. So it's well-rounded. Also, individuals that are very critical of what they're witnessing. So we have that end to it. And so we really try to base our teams on that. And each one has set components. So that if we do run into a particular issue, we can fall back on that particular, I wouldn't say expertise because there are no experts in this field, but professionals that have more knowledge than, say, the rest of us.
Right.
And Anson is a very good one. He started out as a skeptic and now is very, very involved and deals primarily with our diabolical cases.
And any exorcisms needed to be performed?
Not with him.
Not with him.
But we have others that have. Right. And the one thing about an exorcism is you've got to have people of varied faiths at your disposal to utilize. So if they're Catholic, you use a Catholic priest. Protestant, you use a Protestant priest. If they're Hindu, you use a Hindu Buddhist monk, or if they're Native American, a shaman. Because that's how a lot of these expels work, is through the faith of the individuals that are being targeted. So if their faith is strong in dealing with this, with the help of their religious component or leader, then their success rate has gone much, much higher.
Yep. I know I've been called in on several cases that dealt with, because I more or less follow the pagan path. And whenever a team runs into someone who's dabbled in witchcraft, it's like my phone rings and it's like, Heather, we have a case that none of us know what we're doing.
It's true. And there again, we do have some white witches on our team. We have some of that follow the Druid policies. So we definitely don't limit ourselves because it is a world of different varied faiths. And I always say God and the goddess all have different faces, but they're usually one in the same.
Exactly.
And so it just, again, it's how we relate to him and how we feel comfortable with God.
Right. And like you said, I mean, it's going to do the family no good if they're Catholic. I mean, even though I was raised Roman Catholic, that's not how I believe now. But it's going to do no good to send me into a Roman Catholic home and help them.
Exactly.
Because I don't believe in what they believe, and then they're not going to believe in me. So
exactly.
It's full circle.
Literally, we wage a type of war. Now, it is good when we do encounter a positive spirit, a loving spirit, like a grandmother who still tucks in the children at night and is a comfort to have around, and you don't want to get rid of them. But then the ones that are scaring you every single night or causing you difficulties, you want them out. They don't. And so it is. It's you're trying to evict something that doesn't want to go, and it can be a bit of a battle.
And even at that point, they still don't always go.
No.
We've had several cases where we thought they left, and then a week later we get a call from the client again saying, "Hey, it's back."
And it's madder than heck.
And so it just hides while we're there.
And that again, a lot of times. Let me backtrack just a few seconds. We were offered 3 shows to do. And I said, will you allow us to do it realistically? If we don't find anything, we want to say we didn't find anything.
Right.
Or if we can prove it's something else, we want to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the networks all said, well, we would really love to have you, but you've got to remember, this is an entertainment show.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to have a large audience for our client base.
Mm-hmm.
So the ratings have to be high. And it's like, well, then we won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am not going to lie or manipulate the encounters. And so you go in to investigate, and a lot of times, like we were saying, nothing happens for days. You might get a smidge of, a tiny little piece of the pie now and then, but it's very fleeting in some cases. But it's because they don't want to perform like monkeys. They don't want to come out and do a dance show for you and levitate things, unless they're kind of a, pardon the pun, a spirited spirit that likes to play jokes. But, overall, they just go, oh, go away. Leave us alone. We're tired of this. It's not like the Waverly. It's become an amusement park.
Right.
And I really seriously doubt that the entities that are there are going to come out on cue to perform every 45 minutes for each tour that's going through.
I know.
And, it's like when I was young, like I said, I lived in California. I used to sneak aboard the Queen Mary out there. I love that ship. Every single time I went on that ship, I never was disappointed. And I used to go out when I'd take the bus down at 13 or 14 years old. And I knew that ship inside and out. One day I was back in the rudder area, and I was crawling through areas that you're not supposed to be. I had a cake of dust and rust on me, came out. I went around a corner, and there's a gentleman standing there. And I went, oh, no, I'm in trouble. I got caught. And he looked at me, and I was staring at him. And he says, what are you doing here? And I looked at him, and I said, well, what are you doing here? And this gentleman said, well, I asked you first. And I kind of sheepishly looked at him. And I says, well, I'm looking for ghosts. And he got this big grin on his face. And he said, so am I. Now, this gentleman had a very, very dark mustache and white hair. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I can't think of the name.
Peter James.
Yes.
Peter James was famous back in the 70s for being on the Queen Mary and investigating, and also doing other sites, the Sally House and a few other places for the television show Sightings. And Peter and I became very good friends. In fact, he was kind of a mentor of mine. And we would go to the Queen Mary on occasions, working together and doing tours. And Jackie was one of the spirits of a little girl that is believed to have drowned in one of the swimming pools. And she's very vocal. You can hear her very well. And it's our belief that she's looking for her mother. She doesn't know she's dead. And she's been searching for her mother, but she's got another spirit with her that is very protective. And she'll tell Jackie to, leave or come with her instead of talking. And so it was a very good education on my part, learning from him.
Yeah, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, but I'll never forget that, running around that corner and him standing there, him jumping, me jumping, and going, what are you doing? Oh, what are you doing?
That's too funny. And going back to the shows real quick, that's one thing we did when we filmed Real Haunts, Ghost Towns, and Real Haunts 3, is we told the production company we won't fake evidence. And they were 100% agreed with us. And what they ended up doing is they in areas where we didn't get paranormal activity, they just aired us talking about the history and the paranormal claims of the building. And that's what I really liked about that production company. But other companies, you know, like you said, we've been approached and they're like, we'll do what we have to do. And it's like,
yeah, it's going against your credibility.
Right.
And you're the one that has to look in the mirror each night and see, why did you get into this in the first place? Now you're kind of selling your soul to the devil. And I always like, there's one TV show, whom I shall not name. They started out very simple, but now they have all these tech vehicles. And, you know, when we arrive at a scene, we stagger our arrivals. We don't go in marked vehicles, primarily because if a person is really having a problem, they don't want to advertise to the whole neighborhood, oh my gosh, they've got ghost hunters there doing an investigation. But with one particular show, they've got, you know, a nice van and 2 matching vehicles, and their name written all over the place. And it's like, oh, I'd love to have that, but not for the reasons that.
Yeah, we don't even wear our team shirts when we go on an investigation to a client's house. If we're just out doing an event, you know, we'll wear our shirts so we can be identified, but it's like no identifying marks going. I mean, half the time I put my stuff in a backpack so it doesn't look like I'm bringing in briefcases of stuff.
Well, I've had people literally, when we go on an investigation, it kind of works both ways. We've gone up to the door, and I've got a couple of my people with me. And I had one time this couple open the door really enthusiastically, and I introduced myself and my team members. And then they started kind of looking over my shoulder, looking in the background.
Where's the camera crew?
Yes, that's exactly what they said. Where's the camera crew? And I said, well, our camera person will be here shortly. No, the TV camera crews. Says, we don't have TV cameras crews. They slammed the door in our face. And it was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
You know? And so it was like, okay.
Yeah, I know someone who went on an investigation, and she had all of her girlfriends around the kitchen bar area drinking wine and eating hors d'oeuvres, you know, waiting for the team to show up, and they were just going to be there to watch. And they were, it's like, no. It's like only people who need to be here.
Right. Again, you don't want it to be a 3-ring circus, but it does get that way. Yeah. But we get stories that we can tell, that we can laugh about later on.
Right. Exactly. Gosh. It's like, that's what we need to do a show about, is the actually going to a client's home that isn't really a client. Right.
Exactly. It's the misadventures of the paranormal, you know, something along those lines. There was one show I did want to develop, and it was a take kind of like Paranormal CSI, where it actually shows the investigation, but it also shows the scientific end of it, looking at the evidence, sending it through computer programs, looking at the hardcore, analyzing it, sending out to different universities or research laboratories. And I always kind of held that in the background a little bit in case somebody actually does call and says, hey, you know, that's a pretty good idea. It's different. And, we're always trying to think up new ideas. One of the shows that we're going to be developing here for YouTube is a program which we call the Apro Kids. Okay. And it's going to be a group of kids that are going to talk about videos that are on YouTube or other types, talk about equipment, talk about investigations, but it's going to be from a kid's point of view for kids. And it's going to be a little bit original. We're not going to put them out in the field, but they're going to talk about those things so that kids can understand a little bit more about what the paranormal is, and it's not all spooky horror.
Almost like a Mystery Science Theater.
Yes, exactly.
Where they're talking about it.
yeah, get these kids goofing around and laughing about things and commenting on it. I think it's going to be successful. In fact, we're in the process of shooting our first episode right now. But,
That's cool.
we try to do different things than off the cuff. And
Yeah, make sure you send me your YouTube link so I can share that out and people
Absolutely.
can keep an eye out for that. That sounds really interesting.
yes, absolutely. But, you got to have some fun with it. I've had, out in California, I've had production kids that were in college that made videos, cartoon videos, animation. And we've got a couple things up there on our site that were done, and some documentaries and a few things along those lines. So we're always doing something. But we kind of fell back a little bit with the pandemic and so on, where we haven't done a lot of that. In fact, our cases kind of dropped down, but now we're starting to pick up again.
Yep. Yeah, no, we've been quiet here lately for me as well, because I've had knee replacement surgery. So we're just kind of, we're taking this time to get organized again. So that way we can hit the ground running when we're ready to get going.
Exactly. And you do. Sometimes you have to step back and take a breather for a little bit. But that's why you also have good people working for you. And they can pick up where you can't. Like I said, I was in the hospital for 1.5 years. Most of the time I was on video chat or on the phone going, no, this, that, yes, take me with you. Yeah, they got their camera in front of them so I could be virtually there.
Right.
Go back that way. Go back that way.
It sounds like things I do. I was recently asked to appear on a TV show based on my book and a chapter of my book. And because I wasn't in Vegas and I couldn't fly out of there because of the knee surgery, they did it virtually, and they actually took me on the investigation with them via camera because I couldn't be there.
It works. It's an original concept.
I'm sitting here. I'm like, wait. Did you see that?
Yeah, that's it exactly. We're kindred spirits there. We've done the same thing.
I thought it was weird that we did it that way, but I guess it's not so weird.
Well, and sometimes I have to do that with my other teams that are across the country, because there's no way. We don't have a private Learjet in order for me to fly across the country.
Don't all teams have one of those?
I thought they did, but we're just not that successful yet. Wouldn't that be something? Goodness gracious! I'll get on the Learjet and fly out here just about 5 minutes from now. But yeah, it's a crazy adventure, and but I have to have tele meetings and so forth with the other teams and discussions and so forth, so that they at least know who their leader is. And but yeah, I go on those virtual tours, especially if they've got something really interesting going on.
Yeah. And it also, I mean, the way technology is nowadays, it takes you to places that you couldn't get to normally, even just to see it.
Yeah.
And it's because, I mean, during COVID, my co-host and I, we also host Ghost Education 101 on Wednesday nights. And that was more or less because we were seeing so much misinformation getting put out there, because during COVID, all these teams were going online. And we're like, no. So we started that, and we get people on. We do training presentations on EVP. Like tomorrow night, we're doing EVPs and how to graph them and how to analyze them. And we need more people like you and I out there training people to do it the right way.
Well, we do offer academy courses, and we usually do them at either high schools, libraries, or college settings. And we have three basic courses on all of the aspects: hauntings, UFOs, cryptids, and they are able to get a certificate of completion. But if they take all 3 courses, and usually each course is about a week long, and they'll get a actual basic starter kit from us, and
cool.
And so it does help. But we get quite a few people that really enjoy going through the class. And but there again, just like you and I, we want them taught correctly. If they're going to go out and start their own teams, do it the safe way, do it the right way.
Yeah, I know one class we even did was paranormal paperwork.
Yeah.
Because people don't realize there's, if you're going to do it right, there's paperwork.
Document. Exactly.
And even the legal aspects of it,
Gosh,
client
yes.
signatures and
Waiver forms and
right.
you name it. And it is. It's like a business in many ways. And that's where a lot of them are failing, is they don't want to do that. They don't want to take the time to do that. And they're the ones that are getting in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was one that I guess got run off by the police department for being in an area that was basically condemned.
Mm-hmm.
And what did they do? They said, oh, well, we couldn't get in there. Let's go to this other place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, can't do that.
No, you definitely need permission. And that actually reminds me of something I saw. I can't remember who it was, but there was a team. They were filming live and they had permission to be where they were at. There was an actual investigation that they were doing, I want to say at a museum or a bed and breakfast. And they actually got swatted. And have you guys ever had anything like that? I mean, if you can see on the live, the police come in or put them in handcuffs.
No, because I did learn my lesson very early when I did get caught on the Queen Mary when I shouldn't have been. And they said, well, you've always got to ask permission.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuck with me. And so wherever we go, we always have waiver forms. We have signed permissions so that if somebody does come, like I said, the police department, what are you doing here? Well, we've got permission. Here's the letter of authorization and the contact person. But it does happen.
And from this one, what I understand is someone had called because they saw their live and said, hey, there's, criminal activity. So the SWAT team actually showed up.
Yeah.
And it was no questions asked at first because of the call that was made. And then they proved that they were allowed to be there. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And we have had police come up to us. And that's, again, because you say you're out in the graveyard at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and people see you walking around, oh, well, wasn't the graveyard supposed to close at 9 o'clock? What are those people doing out there? Are they terrorizing? Are they vandalizing? And so they will call the cops. And you got to be prepared.
Exactly. And speaking of cemeteries and graveyards, what are your thoughts on them actually being haunted? Because I've heard mixed reviews on it because, I mean, if I'm going to haunt somewhere, I'm really not going to haunt where my body's buried.
I think that spirits, the way I look at it personally, is that there is a connection to our bodies, even in death. Mm-hmm. They may go back and visit their mortal remains, but they're not going to hang around. Mm-hmm. If they're going to hang around anywhere, I always say, go to Disneyland. Disneyland is one of the most haunted places there is. Mm-hmm. Queen Mary, parks in general, places that offered something of great joy to those entities. Their homes. That's why their spirits in the homes. They don't want to leave their homes, and so on. But graveyards, we'll get periodically some good EVPs or photographs, but you go back, you don't get the same thing every time. Now you might get something following you home. Mm-hmm. We've had little children ghosts follow some of our team members home because they had children. Mm-hmm. And we try to help them, cross over. But again, they may not be aware that they're even passed away. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be considerate in that matter.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I worked for Walt Disney World for more than 15 years. And I was in recreation, so I got to go to a lot of different places because I was also one of the first responders at each property that I worked at. So I knew where the deaths occurred, and the areas and locations. And it was weird. I mean, I don't think there was a week or a month that went by that I didn't see something.
Sure.
And it was always, there I am documenting it, but I wasn't supposed to say anything because Walt Disney World's not haunted, and no one dies at Disney.
Oh, no, bad for business. But ironically too, it's like the Queen Mary when it first opened up to the public. They had always had rumors of things going on, but they never wanted to advertise it because that was bad for business.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, this new spiritualist movement started, as I like to call it, 100 years later, and it's the now thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now the Queen Mary, basically 80% of it deals with the hauntings.
Mm-hmm.
And they even have a haunted carnival during October. So they realized, well, wait a minute, we can make some bucks on this. And good for business.
Yeah,
and
they embraced it.
Yeah. So it can go either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know there's, and what I find interesting about this is they did appear on Ghost Adventures, but there's several locations in Las Vegas that when we investigated, we had to sign non-disclosure agreements because they were afraid of losing mostly the Chinese or visitors because they won't go into a haunted location.
Right.
And but yet then, Ghost Adventures comes along and says, hey, we want to investigate. And the next thing you know, it's like, how come they get to say it? So like the book I just wrote, there's 2 chapters in it that says undisclosed Las Vegas Strip location and then an undisclosed Vegas location.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to share my evidence.
Sure.
But I couldn't point blank say, hey, this was X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah.
It again, big names, big turnouts, don't do as I say, kind of thing. And it's all right. Like I say, I watch it primarily for entertainment purposes, but because a lot of their facts are wrong.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say that.
Yeah, it's not exactly true, but okay, if it gets a rating, so not my show.
Yeah, no, because I investigated a lot of locations that they had investigated.
Yeah.
And it's like, you go back and rewatch the episode, and it's like, no.
Yeah.
The person they're talking about didn't die there. They died here. And it's like 20 miles away.
Exactly. Well, they did that with the Melrose. All the facts were not exactly correct.
Right.
It kind of followed the theme, but not exactly the true story.
Right.
And it's like, oof. People, when they watch these shows, they take it literal, and they think that this is what's going on. And, so you got to be careful how you present yourself. And I know that the big show on the books right now is Destination Fear. Yeah. And it's kind of overdoing Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures. But I think it's because they're new. They're also fresh. There's not a lot of hype and so on. I enjoy watching them. I feel they're more realistic than most shows. But again, you got to wonder. It's still a TV show.
Right. I heard they got canceled.
That's the rumor.
Okay. Because everyone's throwing a fit on Facebook and sending emails to Discovery. Yeah.
Which it might pull out another season if it's large enough. I'd like to see him do an international tour. Go over somewhere else, some of those older places. And that's going to be the fun part about us when we start expanding in Europe, going to those historical locations that are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old, and partaking in that. And hopefully by then I'll have my Learjet, or I'll have to be flying coach, one of the two.
Yeah, I know. I wish I could remember right now, because in my research, I mean, granted, it's not a Florida lighthouse, but I think it's in Scotland, the oldest lighthouse in the world. And that's one place I want to get to. Yeah.
Well, our chapter is very conveniently located in Aberdeenshire, and it's very close to Loch Ness. And they recently had a Bigfoot sighting there. So you've got your cryptids, and of course Nessie, and then you've got these historical haunted locations. So they're going to be busy. They've got already. They've got a good following on our Facebook page, and that's the nice thing about our Facebook page. We have a primary page, and then we have chapter pages, which are geared solely for those regions,
right?
And stories and evidence and so forth. So we've got quite a few members following our Scotland chapter, most than some of the others.
Yeah, I know my dad growing up, he always, because our family origins are from Scotland and Ireland. So he said he always wanted to go back to Ireland and just get on a bike and ride pub to pub drinking. And I was like, heck no, I want to get on a bike and ride pub to pub, just looking to see if there's ghosts at each pub.
I know. And there usually are. Every pub has a history. And then you got the elemental side of it.
Yes.
My great grandfather lived in Ireland, and my grandmother used to say that every time he'd go out, he'd always tip his hat to little bursts of wind and other, strange things that he would encounter, saying they were the Fae.
Right.
And he totally believed it.
Yep.
And who's to say that they don't exist? We've got strange things here in our country too. So it's a very good possibility.
In Norway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the other side of my family. I'm Irish and I'm Norse. So it's like, oh, I've got a lot going on here. And I want to go to those locations and see them.
Yeah. You got me thinking now of things I want to go do.
The bucket list, I know it's
like, I don't want to say, hey, I'm not going to help clients. I'm going on my own paranormal adventure. I'll refer them out to somebody else.
Exactly.
You in the Florida chapter, I'll refer them to you.
Oh, I know it. Well, we are definitely, Anson and I are going to go on a whirlwind tour of locations this summer, which will be nice. So I am looking forward to that. Go see some of the other chapters and so forth around the country and get reacquainted with a lot of my friends. So
if you guys make it to Southwest Florida, let me know.
I'm sure we probably will. Actually, I might take you up on that. My dear boy passed away 3 years ago, and he loved Fort Myers. And so I took his ashes down and we deposited them there in the Gulf. And on the anniversary of his birthday date, he, oh, for goodness sakes, hold on one second. I got to pop up notice. Hate those things. His ashes are there. So we go down on his birthday, and that's on July 11th. So definitely we'll look you up. Because we're not going to be that far.
No. And I actually, I don't know if you've heard of John's Pass.
Yeah.
Okay. We love going there. And I'm actually, keep your fingers crossed, I've been working on talking to a few people on doing a haunted cruise.
Oh.
Like do it once a month, because we're about 30 minutes to an hour away, depending on traffic, but do it once or twice a month.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Because they do the dolphin cruises out into the, area. And there's, you have the house from where Cocoon was filmed, and there's a lot of haunted houses that you pass by over there.
Yes. I'm very familiar with them.
Yeah.
So yes, that would be an awesome thing.
Yeah. So I'm hoping. I keep getting passed around to different people. So it's like I keep presenting the pitch to a different, and no, I'm not in charge of that here. You need to talk to this person.
Yeah. Oh, I know it. Yeah, definitely keep me updated on that. I'd like to go out on that. That would be so much fun.
Oh, I hope so. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that one.
Well, yeah. And as it goes, I really would feel honored if you'd like to interact with us on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
As kind of one of our extended family members. And we add that all the time because it's important, just like we were saying, of keeping those channels of communication open and trying to establish, again, the science of what we're trying to prove or disprove.
Yep, exactly. And it's so hard to explain to people. I don't want to say I have to dumb it down. But for new people in the field, they're like, there's science associated with the paranormal. So what I do is I tell them to take their little EMF or the Eddie Plus out and put it in the same spot every day, for an hour, record it for an hour, and then also monitor the moon phase, the weather, and the temperature. I go do that for, 3 months, year, or whatever. And I go and see what kind of information you get. And it gets them in the habit of, hey, this is all stuff I need to be doing.
You see, that's also on our forms, that they have to document all of the weather aspects of it, the moon phases and so on, because it's important. A lot of people wouldn't think so, but it is, because you've got to try to find collaboration on what certain times certain things happened, and if there definitely is something that is equal to or different with each of those visits.
Yep. Yeah, I know one team I was a part of. It was in Vegas, and I was with them for a short period of time because they weren't. I'm still friends with several of the members, but they weren't. They were going in helping clients, and all they were doing was showing them EVPs and video evidence that they captured. There was no documentation of the weather. No map of the house. I always draw a map.
Yeah.
There, no moon phase, no time stamps, no. And it's like all they did was clip out all the audio evidence and then put it up and play it for the client. It's like, what is that? How does that help them? How does that help the field?
Yeah, you've got to look at it as a forensic approach. You've got to tear it down layer by layer. And because again, I always think of it like a park ranger. What's going to stand up in court?
Right.
And the court of audience is going to want to know.
Right. Yep. Very interesting. Well, we are up against another commercial break. I know I said I would only have you on for an hour, but we've had you on for an hour and a half already. I do go till noon. So if you want to stick around, you're welcome to.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Perfect. I still have several questions for you too. So we'll take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back.
All righty. Thanks.
Want to see your video here? Sponsor WLTK DB Talk Radio and watch us make that happen. With your paid sponsorship of $80, you receive a professional produced audio, video, and banner placement on our station. Not only does your sponsorship air during our live shows, but also replayed on our podcast and heard by hundreds of like-minded people. Visit WLTKDB.com to get started and find out just how hard we work to get you noticed.
Hey everyone, we are back with Christopher George from Anubis Paranormal Research Organization. And for those of you just tuning in, we have been having an amazing conversation about all things paranormal. And I know we have been talking about how new people have been coming into the field thinking it's like the TV shows or thinking they know everything just because they picked up an obelisk or a spirit box. But what kind of tips would you offer somebody who's new to the field?
Do your research first. There's a lot of websites out there that offer very valid, good information, just like yours with your classes. Learn the right way before you go out for your own safety, because it can play on your mind. It can do physical harm. It can do emotional harm. And if you're not prepared for it, I would recommend not doing it. It takes a very strong person in order to do what we do. And there's a lot of times I've sat back and go, maybe I should pull out of this now. But I keep being drawn back in. So
there's something about the field that draws us in.
Well, it's been a part of me for so long. It's just like, there's an old phrase that says you can take the ranger out of the park, but you can't take the park out of the ranger.
Right.
And it's true. And it's just like this. It's always been a part of me, half and half. I still do consultant work for the National Park Service. In my later years, when I became a chief ranger, I was always being sent out to different remote locations in various parks to investigate, because I was the go-to person. I was Ranger Mulder. So, and there again, I would go in looking at it forensically, seal the area off of a missing person, track the data, track the weather, look for signs of any kind of abduction. And in many, many, many of those cases, there's never, ever any evidence of what happened to him.
Right.
And so then you have to start looking at the other end of the spectrum and say, okay, if it wasn't natural, if there is no physical evidence, what else could it be? And you have to start looking at it. Now, that's one of the things. We'll probably lose transmission here anytime. That the Park Service doesn't want you to know. They do not release records of missing people or of any kind of paranormal events because it's bad for revenue, just like Disney.
Yep.
Ooh, I hit two big ones. They're really going to be angry. But it is true that they keep everything very, very hush-hush. But there is a very, very dark side to what's going on out there. I mean, personally, I have seen things that would make your hair curl, just like mine, I was asked a question the other day. Why is it that all male paranormal investigators are bald and have a goatee? I said, something about what we do. I don't know what it is, but it is true.
No, exactly. I never even thought of that, but now, yeah, I'm going to be.
Yeah.
It's a shame y'all can't have hair like Zach.
Yeah.
If it's his real hair.
Yeah, he's probably bald under there just like the rest of us. This is what paranormal investigations do to you, kids.
You lose your hair. Oh, when you were working for the Park Service, did you ever, I know paranormal investigators probably weren't as popular back then, but did you ever have to kick anyone off the property because they were illegally conducting a paranormal investigation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Even we ourselves, when we were doing investigations, would be told by higher ups or the military to avoid certain locations in the park during certain times. And these are our parks. We're federal officers, and we're supposed to have jurisdiction.
Right.
And then to be told you can't enter this particular scene. Why not? It's classified. And so even when we would report on situations, they would go into a separate file by our supervisors. They would be put into a locked cabinet. Somebody would always come. They'd usually be in suits.
Black.
They'd come for those, and they'd be taken, and we'd never see them again. So, it's very mysterious. But, there was one time I was out, and I was on a horseback patrol. And back in the backcountry of Yosemite. And I heard a strange clicking sound. I couldn't figure out what it was. And the horse was getting very jumpy. So I got off the horse and I started looking around, and I kept hearing this clicking sound. And I looked up because it came above me. And when I looked up, I saw literally what looked just like the predator. It was a bipedal something or other. It shimmered. It looked like cellophane was covering it, but you could see through it, just like the movie.
Right.
And there have been many, many reports about these alleged predators being seen in the forests and even in the cities. They've been seen now. So my thinking is, did art imitate true life?
Mm-hmm.
Was there something that the creators of these stories knew that we didn't?
Yep.
And, that's just one of the many things that I have personally witnessed.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it kind of makes you shake your head
Yeah.
and go, what did I just see? And of course, being the heroic ranger I was, I started taking steps back until I could get on the horse and get the heck out of Dodge. So, best to play it safe and bring back some additional witnesses. But that was one of the I was more fascinated. And, that's the thing about paranormal investigators. It's the old joke is when people are running out of a haunted house, we're running into it. And it's true. We're fascinated by the whole concept of everything that we investigate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going back to that, I've always said, I mean, as a writer, that a lot of the stories that we have had to have come from somewhere.
Yeah.
A lot of these, I mean, granted, yes, we do have a very creative mind, but who really, Dracula?
Yeah.
Who would have thought that off the top of their head unless they had something that triggered that type of thing?
Exactly.
Is what I've always thought, or even, zombies, and something had to come from somewhere.
Well, as I say, with every story, there's a grain of truth. But they never say how big that grain is. It could be the size of a coconut.
Right.
So it is true. And I think in that regard, there is, I don't know if you've ever seen the Fresno Nightcrawler.
No.
If you get a chance, look it up on YouTube. There's a couple videos. One was taken at Yosemite of these very, very, don't know if they're cryptid or if they're extraterrestrial, but they are the strangest looking things literally I've ever seen. Basically what it is 2 legs and a head. No torso.
Okay. Yep. I've seen that on Paranormal Caught on Camera or something like that. Yeah.
But what they don't talk about a lot of times is the Yosemite Indians that lived in that region had totems made exactly like them from centuries back. So they too had encountered these creatures.
Right.
But where do these things come from? Again, is it from other dimensions? Is it from some kind of form thought? Extraterrestrial. Again, for each door opened, like I said, 6 more are behind it. And it really frustrates the investigator when they can't come up with a feasible answer for it.
Right.
You just shake your head and put undetermined.
Right. We have several unsolved cases.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
How do I report this either to the client or to the administration or to whomever is wanting the verdict here? So it's like, okay, where do you go? And again, that bases back on a good team who can do the research to see how far back this alleged incident has occurred. Is it generational, multi-generational? Is there physical proof to substantiate it in some form, like totems or something that's in the history books that reports it? And that gives it a lot more credence than possibly a CGI created video or altered sound effects or those things that are much more difficult to prove.
Yeah, and then you had brought it up, the thought forms. What are your thoughts on on those? Like, I know, is it the rake that is believed to be a thought form, or a self manifestation? Yeah,
Slender Man, and there's a few others. There have been experiments conducted that a person comes up with a creature or an entity, and they focus on it. Then they get 3 or 4 or 5 more people into the same room, focus on that same identical thing, and it appears that it's created.
Mm-hmm.
It's much similar to the poltergeist effect,
Mm-hmm.
where somebody is actually generating the activity versus it being an actual entity of its own.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe in some cases that thought form could very well be sustained and substantial to that particular case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know it was the Philip experiment.
Mm-hmm.
That the group of friends got together and talked about their dear departed friend Philip, and then all of a sudden, whether it was Philip or not, or their thought form, they started interacting with the spirit name that was claiming to be Philip.
Well, and again, it's like people will talk about Ouija boards.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the board; it's the intent
Mm-hmm.
focused. Our mind's focused on the board to make that contact.
Mm-hmm.
So are we creating the responses and creating the phenomenon? Or is it actually, which I believe as well too, that intent opens up that passageway, that doorway,
Right.
to allow something else to come through?
Mm-hmm.
But again, the basic is always our mind.
Mm-hmm.
How do we utilize our mind in these things?
Yep.
And, a lot of people will focus and go out into the desert to look for UFOs. Sure enough, they'll show up.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll have encounters. The stone tape theory with a lot of these encounters, like especially in Europe and some of the more haunted castles. What is stone tape? Is it actually a recording embedded into the fabric of the space? Or are we witnessing some kind of a dimensional overlay where the two time periods coexist
Mm-hmm.
at the same time? But only one side of us are witness to it because it's going back to that same moment
Mm-hmm.
that we're encountering.
Right.
So, again, we're never going to have the answers, because the more you think about it, the harder you think about it, and the harder you think about it, the more complicated it gets.
Yeah, we go through a lot of Tylenol from all the thinking.
Not kidding there. Lay awake at night thinking about these things. It's like, oh, golly.
Yeah.
And of course, you get into some spooky things. You lay in bed and dark, and what was that noise? You're right.
Exactly. And what you were talking about actually reminded me, we were on a case, and the first pair of investigators went in and they got no evidence. Felt bad for this woman. She was a 71-year-old woman who just was crying, saying she's not crazy. And it's like, we get you're not crazy. But then my husband and I went in just to see if we could capture anything. And we went during the daytime. And the only piece of evidence that we got from that investigation was her, and we have her on video not talking, but her voice on the audio recorder saying, "Get out." And it was clearly her voice, because she had a very distinct voice. But at the same time, the video recorder showed her her mouth wasn't moving or anything. She was just standing there silently next to me.
Yeah.
It was, and it's like, did she really not want us there, or was she really haunted? And that was the spirit telling us to get out. But that was the only piece of evidence we got on that whole investigation. Sure.
Well, there are a lot of cases where spirits will mimic, and it'll sound just like somebody you know.
Right.
A lot of times, the legend of the Wendigo, for example, it's there again, the parks. Do I believe in the Wendigo? I believe to a certain extent. Again, it's native legend. There have been strange cases that kind of follow the processes, but one of the aspects of the Wendigo is the mimicking of a familiar voice calling out for help, and that individual will respond just to find the creature.
Right.
So, there again, it's hard to say, because we're so limited in what the knowledge is behind these entities, these creatures. And could it have been her telepathically sending out a signal? Absolutely. Again, the poltergeist effect. She deep down probably may not have wanted you there, or felt that you were intruding in her space. So her subconscious projected that energy. And that again, that leads up to a whole new theory of different types of activities.
Yeah, I know one investigator that I worked with in Vegas, and we need to work together again. We worked so well with each other that we just didn't even have to communicate while we were investigating. But his theory was the mind imprinting onto the audio recorder, and we were trying different things to avoid that. Of course, you have the Estes method because you're not hearing the question, you're just responding to the answers. And then the other thing that we had done was we would use 2 audio recorders in a location, and we would pre-ask the questions on one audio recorder. And then we would let it play while the other one was recording, but then we completely left the room. So we didn't even know what was going on, what questions were being asked. And because that's always, who's to say that these EVPs we're catching aren't a member of our team answering?
Well, that's it.
In their head.
Well, again, too, our thought process is energy. A spirit is energy. It doesn't have vocal cords, so it projects onto the tape or the electronic device. Who's to say that our energy, our brain, can't do the same thing? And it again opens that Pandora's box of how much is actually intelligent haunting versus our own issues at hand, the desire to respond. But the Estes method I do endorse because, again, it's something there's a wall that separates the question from the answer. And it's very, just like you said, you can use an electronic device with the pre-made questions and you'll still get responses. Now, unless the individual, and I've done the Estes method, you can't hear anything. You literally have to yell real loud right up next to the person with those sound canceling earphones on. And if you're focused on top of it at what's being heard, you're going to block everything else out.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Actually, now that you got me thinking, I need to get my hands on a novelist again and see if I can think of a word and get the word to pop up on the device.
Yeah, exactly. But the tools, I'd like to see what would be around in 50 years. With some of these new inventions, and basically the whole concept of Edison trying to make the spirit phone way back when in order to communicate with the dead. One thing that's not very well known, the actual creator of the computer as we know it was made by a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he created it in order to talk to spirits. Now, the computer had been around for quite a while, just doing data processing, but what we consider as the computer of today was designed for spirit contact.
Yeah, everything starts somewhere, and who knows, maybe in the future we'll have glasses where we put on the glasses and we can see the spirits.
Which I believe could happen. Because they are just slightly out of phase of what we see. So with a lens that could deflect or reflect a certain amount of light, and they've done that in some horror movies. 13 Ghosts or something like that.
Yes,
movie,
that was a good movie.
It was good, but it was gory. It was like, oh, Lord.
It wasn't your typical ghost story.
See, my favorite ghost story is the original 1963, The Haunting. That one, I still have to watch with the lights on. That scared the bejeebies out of me. Black and white, and just the way it was shot. And they use more psychological horror than visual horror.
Yeah, I don't watch them too much because I can't stand the movies where they have you so in suspense and then something jumps out at you. Those those are the movies I don't like.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I know that feeling. Son of a gun, good season.
I know we attended, we were guest speakers at a convention here in Orlando over the summer, and it was basically all the horror movie. I mean, they had Michael Myers and all the actors for that. And it was like, I felt so out of place. I'm like, here, I'm just a paranormal investigator, and I'm surrounded by, and all the vendors sold horror stuff. And
Yeah. Well, I can add to my resume something that not too many people know. I was in a B horror movie called Machine Head, and I played Mr. Beck, who was the science teacher. And basically what it's about is a reanimation movie, similar to Frankenstein, but with humor of weird science. And so apparently there was a convention type of thing going on down in Fort Myers for many years. Mm-hmm. And I was at work one day, and I had just made mention of the fact that, I'd been in this movie, and, it's kind of a low budget type thing. And I said the name of it, and this guy's face dropped. He says, "You were in that movie?" And I said, yeah, I was in Machine Head. And he says, "We love Machine Head. And you got to come down and sign autographs." And I'm going, what? I just didn't even think anything of it. I didn't even know it was this cult movie, which it had become. And so I went, well, okay. And so I did. And they took some 8x10s of me, and I was signing autographs. Thanks a lot, Mr. Beck, Christopher George. Wow, boy, I've done a lot of strange things, but that was one of the strangest.
I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't give away any good parts, but I do die in it, so I have a dramatic death. It's a noble death.
That's almost too funny.
Yeah. But
I always learn something new about the people I have on this show, but that's a first.
Yeah, let's see. You got a parapsychologist, a park ranger, and now a movie star. That's doing pretty good.
That's made for a great show. But I do really appreciate you being on and staying on as long as you have. Most people just stay on for the hour. So I definitely have my prep work for next week all waiting for me. So I have no prep work for next week to do. But can you let everybody know, we're only have a few minutes left, let everybody know where they can find you and how they can get more information about your organization?
Okay, they can find me right here. Oh. No, you can find us at our website, which is anubisparanormal.wix.com/APRO. We're also on Facebook. Just look up Anubis Paranormal. We have our different chapters as well. Under those, our email address, if you should ever need to contact us, is Anubis Paranormal Research org@gmail.com. Those are the best ones.
And for those of you who have tuned in late, this show will be up on YouTube. Actually, I think it'll just automatically be up on YouTube. Todd takes care of the behind the scenes stuff. And then it'll also appear on my podcast channel, which I'll make sure I get you that link so that way you can have a copy of the interview as well. Okay. And for those of you wanting more information about shows we have coming up later this year, you can find Exploration Paranormal, that's my team name, Exploration Paranormal, on Facebook, or you can go to Exploring the Paranormal Show, and that has everything there. And then WLTK DB Radio also has everything listed as well. Next week, we will be joined by Dr. Barrett, having another amazing conversation with another great guest. Looking forward to talking to her and getting to know her a little bit better. And again, thank you, Christopher, for joining us today. I hope to have you on again later this season when Anson's available.
Yes, absolutely. He really missed not being on. He loves to discuss the other side of things that are out of my department. So
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely reach out to you after the show with all the
Okay.
links, and then we'll set up a date. I think I'm booking out into May and June now.
okay,
So we'll definitely
That would
get
be
you
good.
guys a date in the future and have him on with you as well again.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for having me as well as the organization on your show.
Yep.
It was a great pleasure.
Perfect. Thank you again so much. And thank you everybody
Yeah.
for watching. We will see you next week at 10 a.m. Eastern. Have a great day.
The truth is here and now on WLTK-DB Talk Radio at WLTKDB.com.